We're moving to the streets of London now, and let's bring in Juliana Olayinka from our London studio to tell us what's happening this morning. Good morning, Juliana. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Bissy. Still healthy.
Well, that's good. So Chancellor Rishi Sunak unveiled a £30 billion package to boost the economy and get the country through the COVID-19 outbreak. Of course, he's also suspending business rates for many firms in England, extending sick pay and boosting NHS funding. How are Londoners taking Sunak's offer?
Well, Londoners and the rest of the United Kingdom are taking it pretty much on the chin. Talk about a defining moment. Rishi Sunak, he was parachuted in at pretty much the last minute to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. A couple of days after we've got this COVID-19 global emergency. And there are some papers, some analysts this morning who were calling him Prime Minister Boris Johnson's successor. That's how confident and how slick his delivery was at the dispatch box yesterday. It was always going to be a budget of two halves. They did stick, the Conservative government did stick with some of their manifesto pledges. So really, the spending taps in the United Kingdom are fully much on. £600 billion is how much they've pledged to spend over the next 5 years on infrastructure, not just in the North regions, but throughout the UK. £2.5 billion will be spent in fixing potholes, and another £27 billion will be spent on fixing the motorways. Of course, what everybody's talking about and what everyone's focused on is the government's reaction to COVID-19, and there has been a series of fiscal policies. £12 billion is what the government will be investing, £5 billion for emergency spending in the NHS, £7 billion for businesses and the self-employed, an extra £18 billion of additional fiscal loosening is to suspend these business rates that you spoke about. This will affect retail, leisure, hospitality, pubs. A lot of pubs and restaurants are really suffering at the moment. There are at least 50% less people going in. Look, I got on the tube this morning. I got on the tube at rush hour yesterday. There is certainly, you can feel that less and less people are moving around in rush hour. And so the budget is really trying to mitigate against any serious crash. Also, if you are self-employed, you will still be able to claim some emergency support allowance. So there's lots, at least £50 billion has been put aside to clear up this COVID-19 mess. And of course, the billions that was promised earlier this year to completely revolutionise Britain's roads.
So that probably comes as some relief there. But there is a Cobra meeting later today where the government is expected to switch to tactics aimed at delaying the spread of COVID-19 rather than containing the disease. What strategies would they be looking at?
Well, yes, now that the World Health Organization have officially called the COVID-19 virus a pandemic, the government here are really battling between whether or not they adhere to the scientific advice, and the scientific advice that the government are receiving in the UK is basically saying that banning social gatherings is really not going to curtail the spread. But of course, what we're seeing in China and South Korea is that these stringent quarantines appear to be working. Are they specifically? We don't know. What we do know is that at the moment, the UK are 12 to 13 days behind the trajectory that we're seeing in Italy, meaning that we're still very much far away from the peak. So yes, as you said, there will be an emergency Cobra meeting today, and we will be moving into a delay phase here in the UK, which means particularly old, vulnerable people, people with any underlying illnesses may be advised coming later today to stay away from public spaces, basically to stay away from home. Any healthy adults that have any symptoms, and I believe the symptoms they say start with a severe cough, they're asking people to work from home. We're not sure whether or not this is going to be the case. We're still going to be waiting for an update from the government. But, you know, there are several people that are fiercely annoyed with Boris Johnson and the government. They believe Britain are acting too slow and they should shut down schools hotels, and they should shut down restaurants and even the London Underground just to try and curtail this spread. Of course, we saw last night that the NBA season in America has been suspended, and it is looking increasingly likely that the Premier League and all other division football sessions in the UK will either be cancelled or played behind closed doors.
How have the markets woken up to the announcement by Trump to restrict travels from Europe to the US?
Well, it's another bloodbath here in the UK. All traders' screens are red. A triple-digit fall for the FTSE. The last time I checked, I think it opened at about 222 points lower, which is about 7%. This is following, of course, what you said, Donald Trump banning all flights from the Schengen zone. The Schengen zone doesn't include Britain because we have a border, but when you're in the Schengen zone, you can walk freely into another country. So that ban really put, the US markets in bear market territory, which means they've lost up to 20% of their shares. Once you've done that, you can hardly ever recover. So it's not looking great. Also, as well, the pound sterling is worth about $1.28 at the moment. I think it lost about 0.09%. So it's not looking good, especially with a lot of these tour operators who have really been taking the lion's share of the fall recently, especially the long-haul airlines, IAG, the parent company of British Airways. They lost about 10%. Lufthansa have lost about 10% of their shares. And even those that don't do cross-Atlantic flights like EasyJet and Ryanair, they've also lost about 10% of their shares. So it's a red day in Britain at the moment.
Red day indeed, Julianne. I'm sure you have more updates at 1:30 with Jimmy. We'll see you again then.